The day before the governor announced his deal with Democrats, Republicans revealed an alternative plan with a drastically different take on things, most notably no tax increases of any kind. Here now to talk about some of the other alternatives is Senate Minority Leader John McKinney and reporter Christine Stewart of CTNewsJunkie.com. Thanks both of you for being here.
Nice to be here.
Senator McKinney, I guess if we could talk with you about, first of all, we just saw the governor and he said you all had a seat at the table, but you never sat down. Your reaction to that?
Well, I think the governor's playing some games with us a little bit. The governor did call us and had meetings with us, but at no point were we ever asked to or allowed to engage in serious discussions about here's how we would save some money, here's how we think you should consolidate state agencies and save money.
And you tried to do that?
We tried to do that, and Secretary Barnes was very generous with his time. I spent an hour in my office with him, along with the House Republican leader, and he said at the start of the meeting, we realized when we offered a $1.5 billion tax increase that we wouldn't get any Republican votes. And we said, well, then, why are you asking us to participate when you knew you weren't willing to work with us? He said that he wasn't willing to change his framework. We said, what if we can show you areas to cut state government and lower the tax increase? And he said, we're not going to lower our tax increase. And Republicans just think a $1.5 billion tax increase is too much.
How frustrating is that? I mean, is it any different than when Governor Rell was in office? Compared this year
no, it's very different. I mean, we have one-party government. We have a governor who's a Democrat, and the leaders of the legislature are Democrats. They've structured a budget that they think is best for the people of the state of Connecticut. They're certainly entitled to do that. I think people want compromise. I think people in the state of Connecticut like some balance between the political parties. We've seen down in Washington, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, when one party controls all, things tend to go awry. There are a lot of good ideas that Republicans have put forward. I don't expect the governor or the Democrats to like our entire budget, but there's certainly good ideas in our budget, and for them not to accept them is frustrating. And I think, if they want to have one-party government, now they need to own the consequences of that decision.
Do you feel, though, as if they still won't accept anything? I mean, do you feel as if your proposal is moot at this point?
Well, even today we learned. Governor Malloy's come out and said some very inconsistent things about longevity payment. Those are bonuses given to state employees. They cost us almost $40 million a year. If you've worked for the state for 10 years, you get a bonus. It makes no sense. We wrote the governor today. We've said He had said previously he didn't like longevity payments. He wanted the legislature to give him a bill. We offered an amendment today in the Appropriations Committee just for non-union members. We did not want to interfere with his negotiations with state employees. And the Democrats said no. The governor, unfortunately, through his spokesperson, gave us somewhat of a snippy, ungubernatorial type response, which was frustrating. And there you go. We still have longevity payments. The people of the state of Connecticut asked to be more sales tax, higher taxes on sales products, clothing under $50, higher gasoline taxes, higher income taxes. They're taking away $200 of the property tax credit. At a time when middle-class taxpayers are being asked to bear that burden, making longevity payments makes no sense. And for the Democrats to turn away from that on the Appropriations Committee and for the governor not to support us was frustrating.
Name one thing aside from no tax increases that you would do differently. Is there any sort of spending alternative that you would propose that's different from the Democrats?
Oh, we've done a number of things that are different. As you know, we've called for a hiring of 20 new people in the Criminal Justice Fraud Unit to mete out Medicaid fraud. Nationally, Medicaid fraud's about 9.4%. We think we can capture some of that money in Connecticut. We also look at downsizing state government. There's a report done by the legislature, Democrats and Republicans, that showed there are 1,900 more managers in state government than we need, a surplus of 1,900. We've called for a removal of over 1,200 of those managers. At a time when you're asking rank-and-file state employees, union members, to sacrifice and give $1 billion in concessions, which is absolutely necessary, we think you should start with the top-heavy part of state government, the managers. In fact, many rank-and-file union members have said to me, as we've done town hall meetings, they're frustrated with how many managers there are in state government.
But the governor's even agreed with that at town hall meetings. I mean, hasn't he agreed to that?
He has, but he hasn't done it yet. He's assuming there'll be reductions in the second year of the budget. We don't know that. At the same time, though, the governor's supporting a bill to unionize those very same 5,000 to 6,000 managers, which seems very inconsistent.
You know, you mentioned the Medicaid fraud, and they say you're overestimating how much you're going to get back in that Medicaid fraud. I mean, where are the numbers that you're coming up with?
They come directly from our criminal justice unit in the state of Connecticut. What they've told us is that for every person you hire, we'll recover a certain amount of money. Right now, we don't have many people doing it. I think there's 3 people in the unit. That's why we recommend hiring 20 new people. We've never given it the try. Could we not achieve all the savings that we think? Maybe not, but we need to try. And the very unit that does it says we can get those savings.
Well, what about, I mean, your Medicaid proposal basically would use an asset test instead of just an income test.
Well, that's one of the options.
There would be people who would be dropped.
Well, that's one of the options. But, you know, Christine, we're asking the middle class to bear the burden of an almost $1.5 billion tax increase. We're cutting back state services in other areas. Our unemployment rate is 9%. Something has to give. One of the things we've said in applying for a Medicaid waiver with the federal government is that there should be an asset test. Someone could have a low income but high assets, and that may not be someone who deserves that payment when others are struggling. We don't want to kick people off who deserve it, but we do want to look at restructuring the program, and an asset test might be a good idea.
You know, we have less than a minute, but I wanted to ask you, the governor also says that he thinks that in your proposal that there's too much TBD, to be determined, and he says there's these big unspecified savings.
The governor relies on about $1.1 billion in below-the-line lapses. We rely on about $1.3 billion in below-the-line lapses in the first year, a difference of $200 million. But the governor controls OPM, so he has the ability to do that in other areas. We've taken the same approach he did. We rely on $1 billion in union concessions, as does he. Our numbers are balanced. If the governor doesn't like our plan, I respect that. But to criticize it as saying we've made up numbers is absolutely ridiculous and false.
Well,
if I could just say one more thing. There's talk about passing the budget into law without getting the union concessions. We as Republicans will oppose that. We have a constitutional obligation to pass a balanced budget. And to pass a budget by saying we're going to get $1 billion somewhere down the road later is an absolute violation of that constitutional requirement. And I'm going to urge the governor and my Democratic leaders not to pass the budget until that concession deal is reached.
He says he's going to push for that, though.
Well, then we're going to have to fight back in any way we can, even if it means going to court to challenge the constitutionality of his budget. It simply is not a balanced budget without that deal in place.
All right. We appreciate you taking time. Thanks for being here, Senator John McKinney. Next, the Democrats turn to tell us how they see it. More budget talk coming up next.